And I believe each of us is born with a purpose, whether it's to be a chef or a musician or a doctor, a healer, a podcaster like you, someone who helps bring knowledge and wisdom to the world. My purpose is to inspire and empower people to fulfill their highest vision in a context of love and joy.
Hello and welcome to the Ultimate Health Podcast, episode 358. Jesse Chapp is here with Marnie Wasserman, and we are here to take your health to the next level. Each week, we'll bring you inspiring and informative conversations about health and wellness, covering topics of nutrition, lifestyle, fitness, mindset, and so much more. And this week, we have Jack Canfield on the show. He's the co-creator of the Chicken Soup for Soul series. He's developed 42 New York Times bestsellers and holds a Guinness Book World Record for having 7 books on the New York Times bestseller list at once. He's known as America's #1 success coach and has studied and reported on what makes successful people different. Over the last 40 years, his compelling message, empowering energy, and personable coaching style have helped hundreds of thousands of individuals achieve their dreams. Jack is somebody I've wanted to have on the show for quite some time, and I really enjoyed reading his book, The Success Principles, preparing for this. I'm really into personal growth and development, and this was right up my alley. Some of the highlights from today's show include the drive to pursue excellence, ordinary people doing extraordinary things, working hard but making time to slow down, why Jack transitioned to a plant-based lifestyle, and the most important 45 minutes of the day. Lots of great stuff in this one. We'd really appreciate it if you help spread the good word. Share this episode with somebody in your life, and we thank you ahead of time. Without further ado, here we go with Jack Canfield. Hello, Jack. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Jesse. Glad to join you.
Well, we got a lot to get into today, Jack, and I think a good place to start off is going back to your upbringing. And you grew up very average. You grew up in Wheeling, West Virginia, and your dad was a worker in a floral shop making $8,000 a year. Your mom was an alcoholic, and you say your dad was a workaholic. So what did growing up in this environment instill in you?
Well, my dad, being a workaholic, instilled in me good work habits, good work ethic. I worked my way all through the summers. I worked as a lifeguard at a pool, or I worked in the florist where he was, or I worked my way through college. I worked the summer between college and graduate school as a floor sweeper in a General Electric plant. I started out my career as a teacher. So basically, I think that part was good. I didn't see him as much as I would have liked, but I do think that the fact that he was committed to raising a family and building a business was, that had a good influence on me. My mom's alcoholism, that was not the best thing in the world. She sometimes had bouts of anger. She was not always available emotionally. But the good side of my mom was that she was very adventurous, very curious. She learned how to paint. She learned how to do all kinds of crafts and things. She raised dogs. My dad would show these dogs and, dog shows on a weekend. It was another business. They tried to raise African hounds. I don't know that they ever made any money at it, but we certainly had a lot of dogs around when I was a kid. My mom was someone who adored me. So on that level, I think that it was good. The problem was usually after about 6 o'clock at night, she wasn't there. And my dad and her would fight a lot because he didn't particularly want to come home to her drinking. I think that might have been one of the things that kept him out working so late. So that part was a little emotional tension in the house a lot. And so I became what's called hypervigilant, which is I was always looking, where should I be? Where's safe? That kind of thing. And that served me well as a point guard in basketball and an end in football. I could always see everything that was happening on the field because I had to develop that as a safety pattern as a child. As an adult, I would say before I learned how to meditate, it would make me perhaps on edge a little too much, always looking for where the danger was coming from next. But, now that I've spent years meditating and so forth, that's not a problem anymore.
Right. And did you have any siblings?
I was the oldest of 3 boys. And then I had a half sister. My mother had 3 boys with my first father. We got divorced from him when I was 6. And then my stepfather, who we've been talking about, raised me from the time I was 6 till I graduated high school.
So you mentioned you became a teacher, and I know you became a high school teacher in Chicago, and you taught history. At what point in your journey did you figure out you wanted to become a teacher?
It was interesting. I actually wanted to go into psychology. I majored in Chinese history in college, and I thought I was going to go into the State Department and be a diplomat, work in that kind of field. And when I took the Chinese language course my junior year, I dropped out after about a month. It was so complicated, the language. Like in Chinese, the word ma can mean mother, horse, or house. I think there's a fourth meaning too. Whether you say ma, 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 ma. So it's like, it's like this is too complicated, too hard. I've learned to speak Spanish since then and other things, but I took this course my senior year called Social Relations 10. It was a psychology course. And it was really kind of an encounter group where people sat around and talked about their feelings, their goals, their visions for life, and so forth. I had never been exposed to that ever. And that's when I became aware of the human potential movement and got very excited. But I didn't have any undergraduate courses in psychology. My counselor said you could go into graduate school in education and you could sneak into psychology. So that's how I ended up at the University of Chicago Graduate School of Education. Ended up teaching that first year as a practice teacher, my second year in that program in an all-black inner-city high school. It was the year Martin Luther King was killed. And so it was a very radical year. Bobby Kennedy was also killed, who was a big hero to the black community. So it kind of radicalized me in terms of civil rights and personal empowerment and things like that. And right about then, I started taking more weekend workshops and reading books by Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. And that was kind of when I shifted over and said, I'm more interested in teaching my kids to be motivated, to believe in themselves, to have high self-esteem, rather than just teaching them history.
And when did you meet W. Clement Stone?
It was about a year after that I just described. I was working at a Job Corps center after my year of teaching in that high school in Iowa, which is about 90 miles from Chicago. I went in to take a workshop with him on how to motivate people. And I fell in love with him, his work, the idea that you could have affirmations and visualization, the law of attraction, taking action, responding to feedback, clarifying your values, all of that. So when my Job Corps center got closed down a year later because it was in a Democratic district when I think it was Nixon, whoever it was that got elected, and I can't quite remember. But anyway, they shut them down and moved it to another district. And in the process of doing that, I started to go to work for Stone and worked for his foundation for several years, running around running workshops for teachers, teaching them, in his words, that success was not a four-letter word, and that it was good to be successful and how to be successful and the principles of success, which was the foundation of what I still do today, although we've learned a million things since then about how to do it more quickly and effectively, things like EFT tapping and things like that.
And you mentioned about a year before coming in contact with Stone, you got into reading, it sounds like personal development work, and you mentioned Napoleon Hill there. So how did you first get turned on to that?
I was sitting in a laundromat my first year in graduate school, and this guy walks in. He says, "Put your book down and talk to me." I was like, "Okay," it's like kind of out of the blue. And it turned out he was a doctoral student in economics, and he was also a jazz aficionado. He had his own jazz radio show at night, one night a week on some radio station. And he was also very interested in everything. And he said he was going to this Living Philosophers series up at this other college in Evanston, Illinois. Would I like to go with him? And I said, sure. So the first lecture was from a guy named Dr. Herbert Otto, who was running the National Center for the Exploration of Human Potential in LA. And he was there in Chicago speaking. And he said that we were only using 10% of our potential and 10% of our mind, our brain. So I went up to him afterwards. I said, I want to use more. What do I do? And he said, well, there's a place in town. It was called the W. Clement Jesse V. Stone Foundation. And they had a program there called Oasis, which was kind of a retreat center where every weekend there'd be a different teacher teaching Tai Chi, teaching Rolfing, teaching psychology, Gestalt therapy, meditation, whatever. So I went and took a workshop and became kind of a junkie, if you will. I think I went to 17 workshops that year. Every weekend that I could get free, I would go to a workshop. I ran out of money as a graduate student. I was always one who went for my dreams. So I said, is there any way I can do these? I'll work for free. And so I volunteered and did a lot of volunteer work for them. And they let me into the seminars for free for the last half of the year. And I just ate it up. And then when I finally went to work for W. Clement Stone, he made the mistake of saying, I want you all to be super educated. So if there's any workshop you ever want to take, take it and the company will pay for it. And I think that year I took 32 weekend workshops. I just couldn't get enough. And then eventually I realized this was my life's work. This is what I wanted to do forever. And I've been a student ever since. I'm constantly learning. I read about 2 or 3 books a week and do my best to integrate it into my teaching and continue to grow.
I'm a sponge and a junkie for all this stuff too. And I'm just curious, what do you think it is in people like us that make us so passionate and intrigued by continuing to want to grow constantly?
I'm not sure. I think that, I know for myself, I've always been curious. I've always wanted to know more. That was encouraged in me by my mother. and my father to, go for your dreams and to learn as much as you can. I think they saw that as a way out of the lower middle class lifestyle. And I just think that it's part of my nature, maybe my personality. I know other people that are not that way as much. They're more kinesthetic, perhaps. They love to play sports and golf and surf and ski. I watched a special the other day. Can't remember the guy's name, but he was a world class skier, probably one of the best free skiers on the planet. And that's all he ever did, ski. But he became the best on the planet. And it was just that the thrill of doing it and getting better at it and the adrenaline junkiness of it. And that's what motivated him. And I'm glad it did because it was a very intriguing movie to watch for an hour and a half. I've always been intrigued by anyone who goes for excellence in anything, whether it's the best surfer, the best skier, the best cosmetologist, the best hair cutter, the best artist, Muhammad Ali is the best boxer, whatever. I'm always inspired by that. So whatever field it might be in, I think improvement is in a lot of people's nature, but it's not always necessarily in learning the kind of things you and I are interested in.
And it's interesting you said that you're intrigued by people trying to become the best and inspired, and I'm the exact same way as well.
When I did the Chicken Soup for the Soul books, one of the things every book had about 5 or 6 sections. There would be a section on love, a section on self-esteem, a section on overcoming obstacles, a section on going for your dreams, a section called eclectic for things we didn't know where to put. But people overcoming obstacles, people going for their dreams, people pursuing excellence, like the world's barista contest where you get the person that can make the best cup of espresso on the planet. I don't drink coffee because I don't do well with caffeine in my system. It jacks me up too much. But the fact that there are people that do that I find that amazing. Watching a show like Chef's Table on television, but these world-class chefs that go for 5-star, Michelin star restaurants and stuff. I never fail to be amazed by that, whether it's Bon Jovi trying to be a great rock star and how he accomplished and overcome his obstacles. I just saw the Rocket Man, the movie about Elton John recently, and that same drive to pursue excellence.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to matter what it is. It's like this seeing the passion in people when they're operating in that way. It's just addicting and it draws you right in.
I think most children naturally have that, whether it's to be the best video game player or the best baseball player. I have a nephew who's only 3. He wears this catcher's uniform, like for baseball, around all day with a little breast pad on and his mask. And he's always hitting this big ball with this big bat. And he has the crouch down for a catcher. Where did that come from? It's in him to pursue that. And he wants to be really good at it at 3 years old. Whereas for me, baseball was not it. It was something totally different.
A word I constantly find myself using when it comes to me and my career and what I'm trying to do is focus. And this, I think, rings true for, you mentioned the skier that was passionate and honing in on that craft. And obviously you have your area of passion and expertise. So how important do you find that is for somebody to really hone in and focus when they find what they're passionate about and what they want to do?
Yeah, well, the first thing obviously is to allow yourself to pursue your passions and for parents to support your kids in pursuing their passions. All my children are either artists or musicians of some kind. And, as a parent, you're sitting there going, well, that's a hard row to hoe. Not that many people make it as, with recording contracts and sell paintings, enough to make a good living and so forth. But I've always supported them in that. And for me, I think that the same thing is true, that, finding that passion and pursuing it, no matter what it is, the more successful we become, the more distractions are possible. In my level, everyone comes to me wanting me to co-author a book with them, wanting me to be a spokesperson for their products and services, wants me to invest in whatever they're doing because I have a lot of money as a result of my success. And I have to be really, really, really cautious not to go off on what we call chasing shiny squirrels. And so what happens is that I have to know very clearly what is my purpose. My purpose is to inspire and empower people to fulfill their highest vision in a context of love and joy. And so if someone comes along with a great real estate deal or that wants me to be involved in some business that they're putting together, if it's not inspiring and empowering people to achieve their highest vision in a context of love and joy, then that's off purpose for me. And so I have to constantly go back to, what am I here for? What is my purpose? And I believe each of us is born with a purpose, whether it's to be a chef or a musician or a doctor, a healer, a podcaster like you, someone who helps bring knowledge and wisdom to the world. And as you say, you have to stay focused. And today, if you open up your email, if you open up your Facebook page, there's so many things to be distracted by. My wife likes to watch 2 hours of television a night, usually from about 8:30 to 10:30 before she goes to bed. I have to be very careful not to get sucked into that. I want to spend time with my wife, but that's usually when I'll actually come back to my office and work and either write or answer emails or focus on, usually my writing projects. So there's so much television you could watch, so many shows, so many books to read, so many, whatever. It's easy to get lost. I mean, I've seen my wife go on her Facebook in the morning and 2 hours later, she's still reading feeds from other people. And I'd rather be someone making history than reading history. It's been the way I've been in my life.
Well, speaking of TV, this comes back to Stone, and one of the principles he instilled in you was to eliminate an hour of TV a day. So talk about how that came about and how that impacted you.
Well, one of the things that's a great memory. When I went to work for Stone, he interviewed me on my first day of employment. He asked me 3 questions. One was, how much do you watch television? I said, yeah. He said, how many hours a day? I said, I don't know. He said, that's not an answer. Think. He was very confrontive. So I said, I don't know. I watched the Today Show in the morning. I watch the news when I get home, and I probably watch an hour of something, maybe the Late Show or whatever. He said, that's 3 hours a day. He said, you're only awake 16 hours a day. That's almost a fifth of your life you're spending watching television. He said, I want you to cut out 1 hour a day. And I said, okay. And then he went on to explain that if you cut out 1 hour a day of television, that's 30 extra hours every month that you'll have, which is almost the equivalent of a 40-hour work week. So you're giving yourself about 2.5 months of additional 40-hour work weeks a year if you cut out an hour of TV. And then what I want you to do with that, he said, I either want you to exercise, get healthier. I want you to read, get smarter. If you're in sales, I want you to make sales calls, you get wealthier, study. But most people, he said, he called the television the income reduction box. He said, you're watching other people get rich while you're not. And you're watching other people play football. They're getting healthier while you're sitting there not getting healthy, probably drinking a beer and eating Cheetos or whatever. So the idea was that was very, very empowering to me to realize I could have 365 additional hours a year, which gives you almost like, it gives you a 14-month year to be, if you were competing in sales or to write a book. I mean, think if you took 2 months off and all you did was write, you could easily write a book or two. And so that has been something that stayed with me. So I do limit my watching of television. And the other thing I got addicted to for a while was TED Talks. And there's, 18-minute talks. Now, it's not a bad addiction because you're learning something. And I would get a story or an idea or a phrase I could use in my work. But even then, you could go down that rabbit hole of other people's work instead of focusing on your own if you're not careful.
Now we're going to take a quick break from our chat with Jack to give a shout out to our show partner, Organifi. Strengthen your immune system and energize your body with the superfood ingredients in Organifi Red Juice. It contains cordyceps, rhodiola, Siberian ginseng, reishi mushroom, acai, beets, pomegranate, raspberry, cranberry, blueberry, and strawberry. To make a red juice, all you need to do is add a scoop of the powder to some water, you give it a shake or a quick stir, and you're good to go. And the red juice powder is absolutely delicious. You're going to love drinking it. And the whole lineup of Organifi products are organic, gluten-free, soy-free, vegan, and keto-friendly. And as a listener of our show, you get 20% off your Organifi purchase by going to ultimatehealthpodcast.com/Organifi. Again, that URL is ultimatehealthpodcast.com/Organifi. And Organifi is spelled ORGANIFI. Start drinking the Organifi Red Juice and give your immune system a boost. Now we're going to give a shout out to our other show partner, Sun Warrior. Sun Warrior Soul Good protein bars are plant-based, they're soy-free, gluten-free, non-GMO, and vegan. They come in 4 flavors: blueberry, cinnamon roll, coconut cashew, and salted caramel. And when you buy a case, it comes with 12 bars. And over time, Sun Warrior has modified the recipe of these bars. They've simplified the ingredients and given them a new look. And as a listener of our show, you get 20% off your Sun Warrior purchase by going to ultimatehealthpodcast.com/sunwarrior. Again, that URL is ultimatehealthpodcast.com/sunwarrior. On top of that, if you spend $50 or more, you get free shipping. Go and give the Sun Warrior Soul Good protein bars a try today. They make the perfect snack on the go. And now back to our chat with Jack. And it's profound when you start doing the math and really look at the numbers. And just like you brought everything forward there, this ties back into what you're just talking about social media. Back when you were getting started, there was only the TV. And now we have the internet, we have social media. So there's just all these layers of distractions that are continuing to, accumulate. Now there's different social media platforms coming out all the time. And you mentioned the TED Talks, and there is just so much. And it's really interesting because you're somebody who, over the course of your career, has been there before the internet and after the internet and through the rise of the internet. So, talk about where you're at in your career when the internet started to peak and how that influenced how you went about doing things.
Well, before the internet, promoting a book was complicated. You had to go to a book signing, either, in a bookstore or maybe a church or a professional conference you'd speak at, and you'd sell books in the back of the room. We started out with cassette tapes, if you can even believe those things existed once. And then we went to DVDs, and now everything's an MP3 download. What the internet did was great for us in a sense that allowed me to be able to be on a podcast like yours and be able to talk to people in 38 countries. And, my book, The Success Principles, or the Chicken Soup for the Soul books, or my new workbook, The Success Principles Workbook. I mean, in the last probably 6 weeks since that book came out, The Success Principles Workbook, I've been on probably 40 podcasts and reached millions of people. Now, before that, I would have to fly to New York, do a local television show, do a bunch of radio shows, go to a book signing in the afternoon, maybe a book signing at night, do that for 2 days, get on a plane, fly to Atlanta, and maybe do 2 weeks on the road, exhausting, and not reach as many people as I can reach in one podcast today. So that has revolutionized what we're able to do in terms of reach. My new book, when it came out, we sold 20,000 copies in 2 days on Amazon just because of podcasting. And then they went back to the print with another 10,000 and ran out of that in a few days. So that would have been impossible before. And then the other thing that the internet has allowed us to do is to market our programs online and to do online trainings. Like, we now have an online train the trainer program where I've certified over 3,000 people in 114 countries around the world to teach my work. And that wouldn't have been possible. People in Iran and Iraq couldn't get visas to come to America, but I can train them online. And that was all pre-recorded trainings. And now we're doing live trainings. We've had to pivot, as everyone's had to pivot. If you're doing live trainings, as we were when the COVID-19 pandemic hit us, all of a sudden in California, it said nobody can meet. You can't have meetings of more than a couple of people. And now they're telling you don't leave your home, don't travel. So we had to cancel 3 trainings with about $1 million worth of deposits. And in order to not have to return $1 million, which actually we, like anybody, you'd spent some of those deposits on salaries and so forth, we had to pivot and turn all those trainings into virtual trainings online to keep those clients. We're going to not just to a new normal, but I think a new better. What we've learned in the process was that before, if you wanted to do a training with me, you'd get on a plane and fly from wherever you were, including India and Pakistan and Malaysia and Thailand and so forth. That's a big expense for people, hotels, airfares, and so forth. And now we can do a virtual training. I can have people from 60 countries on a training. We're actually, increasing our revenues in that area rather than seeing them decrease, which is what we were all very concerned about, several months ago. So I think the internet has changed everything, and the ability to record something like we're doing today and then have that be archived where people can watch it a month from now, 3 months from now. Someone, maybe they discover me for the first time, then go to my YouTube channel and they can watch hundreds of hours of me, or they can go to Tony Robbins' YouTube channel or your podcast and watch the archival broadcast. We have endless opportunity to reach people now that we never did before.
And what about with the rise of social media? How have you navigated those waters over the years?
Well, at first, I was not a big fan of social media. First of all, being 75, it was new to me. How do you do a Facebook Live? How do you post on Instagram? How do you do Instagram Live? How do you get someone else to come in on that same thing with you? And I've been learning a lot about that in the last few years. I just did my first Instagram Live about 3 weeks ago. I'm doing Facebook Lives on a regular basis now. I was one of these people that always had to prepare everything, outline it, get your slideshow together, whatever. And now I know that I know enough just to get on and trust that I know to speak from my heart about something I care about. It can be short, 3 to 5 minutes. What I love about those live things is you start seeing all these people scrolling through going, this is Joe from Kenya. This is Mary from Nigeria. This is Joe from Pakistan. This is people from Italy and Croatia. And it just blows me away that I am talking live to all those people at the same time. So I was a slow adopter at first. It was like, I wasn't really wanting to tell everyone what I had for breakfast. I didn't see how relevant that was in the world. But I do find, like, when I go on vacation, somehow people care to know that I'm in Hawaii and I went surfing that day, or I went scuba diving, or my wife and I had this incredible meal at a luau or something. So I've gotten used to a little more of that. My wife's a little more private, so I don't always include her in all those things. It's been great to, I think, realize that people want to see the real authentic you. I think that's the thing that I've seen the most is, and I think this is the effect of social media in general, is going from the prepackaged, slick, image that you want to project into the world to just being your authentic self, especially with younger people. They're not looking so much from the sage from the stage as they are the guide by the side. They want to know that you too have a bad day sometimes. They want to know how you deal with your wife being upset with you because you were late getting somewhere, whatever it is. And I think it's made me just feel a lot more comfortable being, just real.
Yeah, just to highlight what you just went over, I totally agree. And there's just something so real and so raw about, even this podcast. Like, you don't know where this conversation is going, and neither do I. And with the live videos too, and a big part of your career leading up to the internet, everything, like, you could lay out everything in your books and have your editor look at it and refine it. And now we're seeing a different side of Jack that wouldn't have been accessible, say, 20 years ago.
I think people want to connect to people who are real. And I think the other thing I've discovered is that people want to know. I mean, I get asked a lot of questions like, what was your greatest challenge? What was the hardest thing you ever had to overcome? What was your greatest fear? And I think when people realize that you weren't born with a different DNA than they were, that, the fact that I grew up in a family that was challenged with alcoholism, that I grew up in a family that was challenged with, some of an absentee father, that I had to work my way through college, that I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth, that me and Tony Robbins and John Gray and all the people they look up to are normal people who just happen to choose to maybe focus a little more, work a little harder, maybe take more risks. And I think they begin to go, well, if you're normal and you can do extraordinary things, maybe I can do extraordinary things too. And I think that was the great contribution of the Chicken Soup for the Soul books, was this was about ordinary people doing extraordinary things. One of the things I learned when I wrote the 10th anniversary edition of the Success Principles was that when people read the first edition, that came out in 2005, a lot of people thought, well, you're writing about, Steve Jobs, who started Apple. You're writing about this person who was a general in the military. Those are not normal people. And so they didn't think they could do it, that somehow their DNA was different. And so when I did the 10th anniversary edition, I went back and I found people who read the first book who were just normal people, people that were on welfare, people that were a plumber, people that, might have had grown up in the South, with racism, whatever, and how they used the same principles were in that book that they learned from me and overcame their obstacles and became extraordinary. And so more ordinary people could relate to that. When we tell our story and we're real, like right now, I'm writing a book called Living the Success Principles, and it's all stories of people who read the first book or took one of my seminars or watched a podcast or something and applied one of the principles and then had an amazing change in their life, a transformation, success, so that people go, oh, that person's like me. If they can do it, I can do it.
And you've touched on Chicken Soup for the Soul a few times. I'm just curious, where did the idea for that come from?
It started unconsciously. I go way back with when I was teaching high school. And I noticed that whenever I would tell a story to my high school students, whether it was about me or about Booker T. Washington, I taught a lot about Black history when I was teaching in a Black high school because I wanted them to realize their own history. Or, if today I'd be talking about Barack Obama or somebody, they were on the edge of their seats because it was a real life story about somebody real. When I was teaching historical concepts like what leads up to a war and memorizing the facts of who were the adversaries in the First World War, etc., they were looking out the window. So I realized the power of story to engage people. Why is it that we watch movies? Why do we watch television? Why are we mesmerized by great storytellers? Because there's a middle, a beginning, and an end, and there's some moment which we call the chicken soup moment where somebody overcomes something, somebody has a breakthrough, something funny happens, something heartfelt happens that makes you cry. So I think that that's where it started. And then what happened that really turned it into a book was when I was at the stage of my life where I was teaching teachers, I would tell stories about students or about some illustrate some principle. And someone would come up and say, that story you told about the Girl Scout who sold 3,258 boxes of Girl Scout cookies in 1 year, is that in a book anywhere? I need to read that to my students. Or that story about the puppy, or that story about the kid with one leg who climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, is that in a book anywhere? And I'd always have to say no. And one day I was flying back from Boston, where I'd just given a workshop to LA, where I lived at the time. I live 90 miles north of that in Santa Barbara right now. And it was like God hit me over the head and said, you're being told to put all these stories in a book, dude. I made a list of all the stories I knew. There were about 70 of them. I said, okay, I'm going to write 2 stories a week. I'm going to turn them into, written stories, really craft them. And if I do that, at the end of a year, I'll have 100 stories. And so that's what I did. And along the way, I met Mark Victor Hansen about 60 stories into it. And he said he wanted to co-author it with me. And I said, why? And he said, well, you still need 30 more stories. And I've got some good stories and I'm a really good marketer. And anyway, we partnered up and, it was a really match made in heaven. And that's how that book came into being. Now, the thing most people don't know is that book was rejected by 144 publishers over the course of 14 months. We couldn't find anyone to publish it. And so one of the principles I teach is, ask, 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 ask. Don't give up. We'd ask 144 times before the 145th person said yes. And if I had given up after the first, 100 people, Jesse, we wouldn't be talking right now. So it's not to impress people that we sold 500 million books to date, but to impress upon people that if you don't give up on your dream, eventually that breakthrough happens.
144, that's just such an incredible number. And I'm just curious, when you're getting that many rejections, what is it inside you that keeps you pushing forward?
I think two things at that time. One was just a passion for the project, like knowing your why. I had the experience of telling these stories and watching the impact of them, getting standing ovations, having people ask me, where can you get these stories and so forth. And the other thing was knowing that if we never did get a publisher, we would self-publish it. I'm glad we didn't. I didn't really want to be a publishing company. I wanted to be an author and a speaker and a trainer. But I think there was just this inner knowing, this inner self guidance, perhaps this trusting, like the law of attraction, something in us that just said, we know this works because when we tell these stories, people respond. And I think we had to confront that New York is a very jaded city, a very cynical city. Most of the big publishers at that time were in New York. We did a 3-day trip with an agent to New York once, had 21 meetings, all 21 said no. They said it's nobody reads collections of short stories, which was true at the time because all those short stories were fictional. And literary short stories, they're not long enough to develop the characters and to make you really get caught up in a book like you would if you were reading a novel. They thought the title was stupid. It didn't make any sense to them. But we just knew somehow. And so we just kept going. I don't know. There's a friend of mine wrote a book called Go for No. And what he was saying in that book is instead of going for yes and every time you get a no feeling disappointed, what you should do is give yourself a goal of how many no's you want to get that day. So today my goal is 20 no's, which now means every time I get a no, I'm excited because I'm closer to my goal. And we know that the more no's you get, the closer you are to getting a yes. So it just kind of changed the context of how we were working.
And how did you first meet Mark Victor Hansen?
We were both speakers at a conference down in San Diego. It was a holistic health conference that had, I would say, 2/3 of people talking about health and wellness, and the 1/3 would be more topics like we're talking human potential. And Mark was giving a talk called How to Double Your Income and Triple Your Time Off in 1 year or Less. And I needed to do both of those things at the time. So I went to his lecture, and that was back in the days when we were using overhead, these big, 8.5 by 11 slides you put on a big piece of glass and it would project on the screen. And after his talk was over, I went up to him and I said, I really liked your talk. I learned a lot. Would you like to have lunch? And he kept putting his overheads away and he said, sure. And so we went and had lunch and just became fast friends. And that was probably maybe 3 years before the Chicken Soup book actually got published in 1993.
And how many Chicken Soup books are there at this time?
Well, we sold the company a few years ago to an investment group in New York who bought the brand, the titles, the backlist, Our Future Royalties, etc. At that time, there were about 220 titles, and I think they've been doing about 10 a year for 7 years. So it's going to be close to 300 titles now.
And you mentioned you put out the Success Principles in 2005. It's an interesting pivot because with the Chicken Soup books, you're not front and center. You're not, what people are coming for. And then you put out the success principles, and it's Jack Canfield, the success principles. So how important was that pivot for you?
Well, I didn't think of it as a pivot so much as what happened was I was in bed with my 11-year-old son right around then. We were up in like Sunday morning, sitting in bed. I was on my computer, probably answering emails. I don't know. He was playing a video game on his computer. He stopped. He looked up at me. He said, "Dad, how come our house is bigger than everyone else's house that are my friends?" And I said, "Well, Christopher, I think it's because we make more money and we're able to afford it." And he said, "Well, why do we have more money than everyone else?" And I said, "Well, because I'm a best-selling author." And I explained to him what that was. And he said, "Well, is everyone who writes a book a best-selling author?" I said, "No." And he said, "Well, why are you?" And I said, "Well, it's because I've lived my life by these principles." And he said, "What principles are those?" And I started to tell him. And, after about 10 minutes, he got a little bored with it and went back to his video game. But I became intrigued with the question, like, why was I so successful? And so I began to make a list of all the principles I live my life by. And there was 114 of them, which was a little much. But I thought if I did a book with 3 pages on each principle, that would be a good book. And then I realized it took more than 3 pages to write about 100% responsibility and so forth. So I narrowed it down to 64 principles, and that became the success principles.
Now we're going to take another quick break from our chat with Jack to give a shout out to our show partner, Beekeepers Naturals. Beekeepers Naturals Propolis Spray is a staple in our natural medicine cabinet. Propolis is prized as the immune system of the hive and has incredible germ-fighting properties, and even contains over 300 beneficial vitamins, minerals, and compounds, making it nature's ultimate defender. This natural immune supporter is easy to pack with you on the go, and for bulletproof immunity, all you need to do is take 3 to 4 sprays of propolis 1 or 2 times a day, and during periods of increased stress or fatigue, you up that to 4 to 5 sprays up to 5 times a day. And you can also use this spray on minor scrapes, minor burns, and blemishes to encourage healthy skin. As a listener of our show, you get 15% off your Beekeepers purchase by going to ultimatehealthpodcast.com/beekeepers. Again, that URL is ultimatehealthpodcast.com/beekeepers. And if you spend $60 or more, you get free shipping. Support your immune system today with the Propolis spray from Beekeepers Naturals. Now we're going to give a shout out to our other show partner, Sleep on Latex. We absolutely love our Sleep on Latex mattress. It's super comfortable and free of toxins. The mattress is made from natural latex foam, organic cotton, and organic wool. And when you pick up one of these mattresses, you get to pick from 3 different firmness options. They have soft, which is ideal for side sleepers. Then their medium firmness is perfect for back sleepers or side sleepers who want a slightly firmer, more supportive mattress. And the most popular is to get the medium firmness, and this one is also great for couples who have different sleep styles. Their firm mattress is great for stomach sleepers or back sleepers who prefer sleeping on a firm surface. Each of their mattresses ships out for free on the same day you put your order in. There's no assembly required. You get free returns within 100 days from delivery and a 10-year warranty. To get yourself a Sleep on Latex mattress, go to ultimatehealthpodcast.com/sleeponlatex. Again, that URL is ultimatehealthpodcast.com/sleeponlatex. And Marty and I are super lucky. We're actually on a vacation right now, staying with my in-laws, and we also have a Sleep on Latex mattress here as well. So not only are we getting that comfort and toxic-free experience when we're sleeping at home, but we get that when we're here as well. So grateful. And now back to our chat with Jack. You mentioned 100% responsibility, and this is the one that kicks off the whole book, and it's under one of the fundamentals. So talk about why this is so important and why you kicked off the book with this one.
I think it's foundational. It's like if you build a high-rise building in New York, you have to go down like 5 or 6 or 7 stories of foundation so it doesn't fall over. And I think that without taking 100% responsibility, which means no blaming of other people or institutions for why your life doesn't work, it means no complaining about things rather than complaining. You need to take responsibility and create what you want, and no excuse making. It really speaks to the fact that we have 3 functions that we're able to control in our life: our thoughts, the images that we visualize in our head, and also the things we say and do, our behavior. And so basically what I realized is all that anyone's ever experiencing in life is an outcome of how they responded to an earlier event. So if I give you a $2,000 bonus, you could spend it by going to Las Vegas and gambling and having a great time with your friends. But a year later, your net worth is no bigger than it was now. Someone else takes that same $2,000, they invest it, and their net worth goes up. And so the same thing is I could say something to you and you might make one meaning out of it. Someone else might make a different meaning out of it. And depending on that, like let's say there's a recession, which there is right now due to the fact that, a lot of businesses are sequestered, restaurants are closed, people, salons are closed, etc. So a lot of people are having difficulty getting cash to spend and or knowing where to spend it. And so a lot of people, their response to that mentally is, oh my God, there's a recession. We're going to lose our house. We're going to lose our mortgage. My job might not be there when it's over. This is terrible. Whereas another person says, oh my gosh, there's a recession. I always do well, no matter what the economy does. I better get creative and figure out how can I make the same or more amount of money, even though the economy is doing something different. That's two different responses to the same event called a recession. So basically, I'm responsible for my thoughts, responsible for how I visualize the outcome I'm going to get, responsible for how I communicate what I ask for or don't ask for, etc., and responsible for what I do. A lot of people have just hunkered down and watched, 29 seasons of reruns of their favorite TV shows and done, 500 word crossword puzzles for the last 2 months. Other people have, pivoted their businesses, started doing summits, started doing ongoing things, started their own podcasts. I talked to one gym owner recently where a lot of gyms just got shut down. Nobody was going to the gym and, because they weren't allowed to get close to each other. This other guy up in Canada, what he did was he sanitized all his equipment, called up all the people that were his clients and said, look, I can bring my equipment to your house. You can pay a rental fee for it. I'll do Zoom call classes where you can work on your cycle or your, elliptical, your treadmill, whatever. And he's making as much money as he made before the coronavirus created the lockdown. So it's not the event. It's not what someone says to you that makes you feel bad. It's what you say to yourself after they stop talking that makes you feel bad. So we have to take 100% responsibility for the outcomes, for our experience, for our feelings, for our financial situation, and for our health. When we do that, life works. If you don't do that, then everything else I teach you, there's always going to be an out, and you're never going to have that foundation upon which to build a great, successful life.
And I think this is a lot more powerful coming from you because you came from an average upbringing. You didn't grow up with a silver spoon in your mouth and have all these opportunities just given to you. You've created your opportunities. So you can, speak from somebody that's truly been through things and created their own success in life.
Absolutely. As I said, I worked my way through high school, through college. I worked in the summers, and then I started my first teaching job. A lot of people go into teaching because they think they'll get the summers off. I haven't had a summer off in my whole life. I take vacations now. My wife came up to me about 4 years ago and she said, I know you're passionate about your work. I know you love to do it. But I was traveling a little too much for her taste because that's where the work was. And she said, I want 1 month a year with you where we just go somewhere. You don't answer emails. You spend time with me. We're a couple. So we spent a whole month of May in Hawaii. And then the next year, we went back to the same house we rented and spent a whole month of May in Hawaii. Then this year, actually February, we went to India and we went to an Ayurvedic clinic retreat area where we did a lot of detoxing and longevity stuff and came home. I lost 15 pounds. I was, detoxed. I'm now eating a plant-based diet where before I was eating a lot of fish and not a lot of meat, but a lot of fish and chicken and things. I feel much better. My wife and I got to spend every day together. So that's the one thing I say now where we do take a lot more time for each other. But in general, I've worked pretty hard my whole life.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like it. And how hard is it to go from, being full on? And I can hear it in so many of the different things you've talked about here, where you talk about checking emails and going to your office and working while, say, your wife's watching TV at night. You're a hard worker. So going from all out working and living your passion to slowing down and putting the brakes on, how challenging is that? And is it only challenging for the first week? And then after that, the next 3 weeks, you've eased into it? Or what's that like?
There's a detox period, just like, where you're going off of, alcohol or something and you can get the delirium tremens or something like that. I mean, it definitely is like, oh my God, I can't go to my computer and see what's going on. I have to trust my assistant to handle all that. My wife did give me permission to write for an hour a day. So in the morning when she was having her coffee and reading People magazine or something like that, I could write. And so I did write a bunch of stories for my book, Living the Success Principles, but that was it. I would say after a week, I actually enjoyed it. We listened to music together. We did watch some movies together. We played words with friends together. We did puzzles together. My wife's a big Scrabble fan, and so am I. So we played Scrabble together. We probably went snorkeling every other day for a month. We cooked together every night. It was fun. So I literally, after about, I'd say 5 or 6 days, I was totally into that. Then it's called, how do you come back to work after a month like that? Now that's a little bit of a shock as well. But I was able within a week to get back into that.
Talk more about this plant based diet and transitioning into it. Was this something that you were contemplating when you went to India, or is it just something that kind of came up as you were at this retreat? How did that unravel?
Well, I'd always been very health conscious in my life. I took a lot of vitamins and minerals and herbs and antiviral things and stuff like that, naturals. As a result of that, I'm 75. Most people say I look like I'm in my 60s. I've been healthy. I rarely in my life ever got a flu or a cold. Occasionally had seasonal allergies. I learned how to deal with that, homeopathically and so forth. But I think I'd put on more weight than I should have. And this Ayurvedic doctor named Dr. Pankaj Naram, who treats primarily with herbs, had a friend of mine that told me to go see him. He takes your pulse. And within a minute, he said, you've got too much inflammation in your body. You need to lose about 20 pounds. You've got a ruptured disc between L4 and L5. I mean, he knew my entire medical history in about 2 minutes of feeling my pulse, which is an amazing ancient art that he was able to do. And he said, if you come to my clinic in India for a month, I'll give you 17 extra years of life. And I said, that's a really good trade. So I'll do that. And so when I went there, I was not eating red meat, but I was eating fish and chicken and, grass-fed chicken and fresh caught fish off of the coast of Santa Barbara, things like that, some salmon. So I get over there and basically we're on a mung bean soup and ginger tea and vegetables. That was all we were allowed to eat for a month. The first week was like boring, but then I just kind of got into it. But the weight was pouring off. The inflammation was going down. I was sleeping less hours, but feeling more awake. We were doing steam baths every day. We were getting massages every day. We were, doing detoxing things. I feel much, much better. And since we got back, we stayed on the plant-based diet, which I like. I find that I'm eating less and feeling more full, and I'm not needing snacks around 4 o'clock. I recently got into essential oils, discovered the power of essential oils, which are magical and amazing. And I find that if I take a little peppermint and rub that in my hands, essential oil, and then just inhale that around 4 o'clock, it gives me that little wake up stimulus. I used to go and have a protein bar or a protein drink for, which was unnecessary calories that I didn't need. In India, cows are sacred. And so we were staying in an apartment next to the house of this doctor before we would go into the clinic every morning. And the cows were just walking around like dogs. And all of a sudden, like, how can we eat those things? It's like one thing when you're picking up a piece of red meat in a grocery store, but when you're seeing them as real animals, then there are also pigs there that my wife fell in love with. They were cute. And so that was the end of anyone ever eating bacon in our family again, or ham, or, whatever. It just was kind of easily fell away. And we feel good about the fact that we're not killing animals and that we're eating healthy food. And someone said in the Bible, there's a quote in Genesis, it said, I've given you the fruit of the trees for your food and the leaves for your healing. So if you take the healing essences from the essential oils from the plants, the botanicals, and you combine that with the food, the fruits and vegetables and the natural grains, you have everything you need.
You talked about sleep there, and I think you said you're actually sleeping less and feeling better. And this brings me to the most important 45 minutes of the day. And this is something where you're setting aside time at the end of the day before you go to sleep, and you're doing 4 things. 1 being acknowledging your success, 2 is reviewing your goals, 3 is focusing on your successful future, and 4 is making plans for what you want to accomplish the next day. So talk about why this is something that you've evolved to and continue to do.
There's research that shows that what you focus on the last 45 minutes of the day, your subconscious will deal with more often during the night. So it will solve problems that you put your attention on. So don't think of it necessarily as a problem, but what goals do you have that you want to achieve? What are some solutions you'd like to come up with? With Chicken Soup for the Soul, that title came in a meditation. And every night I would say to myself as I went to sleep, in my meditation tomorrow morning, please give me a title for my book. And it was on the 3rd day of the week of doing that this hand came out and wrote chicken soup on a chalkboard. And I said to the hand, what does chicken soup have to do with this book? And the voice said, when you were sick, your grandmother would give you chicken soup. And I said, but this is not a book about sick people. He said, people's spirits are sick. They're living in resignation, hopelessness, and fear. And so it became chicken soup for the spirit that morphed into chicken soup for the soul. So every night I'm implanting into my subconscious mind kind of like, what you want it to work on. It would be as if you had a factory that worked 24 hours a day and you were saying to your night foreman who's going to have the night shift, from 10 o'clock at night till 6 the next morning, here's what I'd like you to work on. So you're visualizing your goals, you're saying your affirmations, you're reviewing your day. I'm always working on a quality, like maybe the quality is assertiveness or asking for what I want or being more mindful or being more compassionate or being more loving. And then I would say to my subconscious mind, show me today where I could have been more loving. And then it'll say, oh, that time you went over to your secretary and you immediately said, where's that report? Instead of saying, hi, how are you? I know your birthday's coming up. How's that going? Whatever. And so now what I can do, I can go back in and I can replay that little event in my mind the way I would have liked to have been. So it's setting down a blueprint for the next time I interact with my secretary. I'm going to be more loving. So that's a powerful thing we call the evening review. The mirror exercise is where you talk to yourself in the mirror and say to yourself, you appreciate yourself for the accomplishments of the day, for any temptations you overcame, and any disciplines you kept, like, working, out for 20 minutes in the morning or reading for an hour or reading the Bible or whatever it might be that are your disciplines that you want to make sure you do. And so all of these things add up to completing your day in a beautiful way. And my wife and I have a little ritual we do if we go to bed at the same time where we appreciate each other. We have this little thing, 3 reasons I'm glad I'm married to you. I'll tell her those and she'll tell me mine. You'd think after a while that would get boring and redundant, but it's really sweet. I don't do it every night because sometimes she'll go to bed before I do. If I'm on a roll writing, I'll say I'm on a roll. I want to keep going. She says, fine, honey, keep at it. But it's more fun if we can snuggle and do that little exercise. But what happens is, other than traumatic events like your cat got hit by a kid riding a bicycle or something that day, you're going to review what you talked about, thought about, et cetera, the last 45 minutes. And so that's a good time to do that. Unfortunately, what most people are doing the last 45 minutes is watching the 11 o'clock news or the latest statistics on the coronavirus, or they're watching some scary, thriller kind of movie, like Friday the 13th on TV. And that's what's playing in your mind. You wonder why kids are having nightmares or you're not sleeping well during the night and not taking advantage of this tremendous gift called sleep and dream state that we have been given.
Such a good point. I'm definitely careful about what I'm watching and taking in right before bed. So, good point to highlight there. And Jack, I know we're running low on time, but I have one final question for you, and that is, what does ultimate health mean to you?
I think ultimate health to me means ultimate in every area of health. I want my mental health to be strong. I want to feel confident, happy, content, peaceful, joyful. I want to have physical health. I mean, longevity is my goal right now. Longevity and endurance and flexibility, all things that you have to work diligently on as you get older. And for me, I want to live to be 115. It's biologically possible. So it's a goal of mine. I really believe that your beliefs about how old you can live is part of it. And so I've set that goal for myself and do the things I think, in terms of breathing exercises, yoga, Pilates, cardio, etc. That's important to me. Financial health. I want to have the resources I need and want to be able to do the work I love, to be able to study the things I want to study, to be able to afford the resources to allow me to do that, whether it means flying somewhere to take a class or being able to buy a book on a whim. Amazon loves me. I rarely go to Amazon.com and don't spend $40 or $50 because someone told me about a new book. And then they always say, if you like this book, you'll probably like this book. And 9 times out of 10, they're right. So I think that kind of health. And then relationship health. I want to really have relationships that are fun, that are nurturing, that are positive, that are empowering, that are enhancing, as opposed to, abusive or expiring rather than inspiring.
Beautiful, Jack. And I can totally relate to your Amazon addiction. I'm right there with you. So, Jack, we've talked about so many different books and projects that you've been involved in, the Success Principles, the new Success Principles workbook, Chicken Soup for the Soul. Other than getting copies of your books, how else can listeners connect with you after the show?
Well, I really encourage you to get the latest book, the Success Principles Workbook. It really will. It's like having a coach between the covers of a book. To find out about our other work, our online programs, our training programs, etc., we're doing an emotions reset challenge in the month of June, and then we're going to do it again later in the fall. Basically, you can go to jackcanfield.com. Just put in your email address. You'll get on our mailing list to receive information about all of our seminars. We're doing some really unique upcoming live seminars that we're starting this summer and fall. So just jackcanfield.com.
All right, we're going to link everything up over in the show notes over at ultimatehealthpodcast.com. And Jack, really enjoyed this conversation, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jesse. Appreciate the opportunity. Take care, my friend.
I really enjoyed that conversation with Jack, and I hope you did as well. Let us know what you thought of it over on Instagram. You can tag at JackCanfield_official and tag at Ultimate Health Podcast. Connect with us over there. Take a screenshot of yourself listening to the show and let us know what you thought and what you took away. For full show notes, be sure and head over to ultimatehealthpodcast.com/358. We have links there to everything we discussed today in a show summary, so be sure and check that out. And before we let you go, I want to give some love to our editor and engineer, Jace Sanderson over at podcasttech.com. Jace, thank you so much for all the hard work you put in. And this week's fun fact is about myself. Today, when I'm recording this, it's actually Father's Day. And this is my first Father's Day now that Sorel is born and I'm a new dad. And I'm just so grateful to be with my 3 girls, Marnie, Sorel, and Goji. And we're having a beautiful day. Have an awesome week. We'll talk soon. Wishing you ultimate health.